This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. My guest on this edition of the program is one of us, a presenter here at WESN. He's a psychologist, Soleil Joseph, and the discussion we're having in this edition of the program has to do with, you could say, the court's mercy on someone who was being held. He spent 10 years and 7 months in pre-trial custody for the killing of his own child. The story is that he was having an argument with the child's mother. They're people from Point Fortin, and that he, in the middle of that argument, he dropped the child on the child's head, and the mother found that after a while looking at the child, months old, she found that the head was swollen and the child succumbed to that. Initially, both mother and father were prepared to tell the court that the child fell off a bed in which they were on and died, but in the time that the man spent in prison, and people were talking about it, relatives told the police that he had done this on three previous occasions, twice in the home and once in the bushes. And that seems to be the way of how, well, this man, I was going to say other people, but probably this is what we want to get at. What would cause somebody to take that kind of action, especially against a little child? Drop the child on the head deliberately, and did that on more than one occasion. The baby died, and the mother was prepared to say that the child fell off the bed. We'll get to that part of it in a moment. But Mr. Joseph, thanks for coming on. Trying to understand what does that tell you about, what do you know of the psychology of somebody like that, who that is how he responds to frustration and to deal with issues in his life, dropping a baby on his head.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Andy, to you and your viewers. I hope we can get into some of the crux of the matter. I want to say everything that we're going to discuss today is based on the limited scope of details and information that we are privy to. All right, so it's not that we can give us a very specific, exact diagnosis based on the limited information that we have available. All right, so so everything that was going to be said here, or conversation that I will have, attempt to answer the questions that you asked, will be an attempt to do so through the limited frame of the information that I have. I really just want to say that, because I don't want anybody saying that I've diagnosed this gentleman from a newspaper article or 2 news reports, right? I haven't seen him, and we haven't done the full gambit of assessment tools or utilize the assessment tools to be able to give an affirmative diagnosis.
Yeah. So before you go there, let me just ask then, it raises a question. Does somebody like this, is somebody like this required to get some help in sorting his mentality out and his behavior and his psychology out then?
By law? No. By law, no. By law, and of course, for frequent viewers of this station, they should know I'm a counseling psychologist by profession, right? And I've been doing this for a number of years, over 15 years. But technically, by law, I don't really exist. So there's not necessarily any mandatory, at least there's no, as far as I'm aware, there's no mandatory assessments specifically required for persons by psychologists. Now, you do have some mandatory assessments by doctors that might be required. I think in public service and so on, if somebody is acting erratically and so on, I think the various health ordinances, they can have somebody escorted or taken to St. Anne's based on those health ordinances. But to say, like an example like here, where you have somebody who clearly was showing a history of behavior, subnormal behaviors, there's no mandatory law to have them assessed.
Yeah, so the judge in this matter, Justice Shireen Bailey Murray, I think it was, so she didn't have a prerogative. There was no prerogative existing for her to order that this person get psychological treatment.
Well, I am no lawyer, and perhaps we may need to bring in or legal mind from the program from on the station to come and have a say on the
Yeah,
matter. But
strictly legal. Yes, go ahead.
from what I understand about how it functions, the judge may have had to set a precedent because as far as I'm aware, there's no significant precedent that has been set, or no legal framework specifically for her to say, well, okay, 21 years or 20 years or 10 years with mandatory therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. And there's a branch of your profession referred to as clinical psychology. You think then this is probably a job better suited for a clinical psychologist to look at it and determine what might be the case here and how to go about reaching somebody like that?
So let me briefly try to explain the difference here.
Yeah.
So there are clinical psychologists who work with me as well. Yeah. And what the clinical psychologists do is that they focus a lot more on testing and assessment. Yeah. So they would do psychological testing and assessment and so on. So yes, they can be utilized for testing to see if these persons, where they're functioning from, in what kind of space, if they are mentally healthy, if they're mentally unwell, what pray tell the diagnosis may be. And then, well, my job essentially is to take that diagnosis and then help them heal, help them get better, right? So it may be that in some of these cases, they may need to have a combination of persons recommended to work with these persons who are clearly significantly subnormal in terms of their functioning, to arrest and address what the issues are and try to rehabilitate them, if possible.
I note you stress that, if possible. But when I first approached you on the matter, you began to talk about the action itself from a perspective that suggested to me that this is a form of, I'm trying to find the correct term for it, but as a malaise in the behavior of somebody that will show itself up as among how many ever other kinds of indicators that something is wrong with somebody. You said dropping a child on his head, and you began to talk about it a little bit. So clearly, you probably had some insight into that kind of behavior.
All right. To go forward, I'm going to go backwards.
Yeah.
So let me go backwards and say here that while the outcome of this situation has and rightfully so, would have a lot of people up in arms, if we track maybe some of the origins of the basic principles of the behavior, we may see that it is a lot more common, particularly in Trinidad, than we'd like to admit. So, for example, if we track the issue was that this gentleman, every time he got into or whenever he got into an argument with his wife, his common law wife, and he got really upset, he would then go and take that out on the child. How many times we can say in the Caribbean that parents have been really angry at work, angry with a spouse, generally angry, and then they take that frustration out on the child. So this is not a one-off strange incident. It is extreme in its regard, and we can go into that, and I could have a conversation as to what would have prompted that or shaped that functioning and so on. But to a lesser extent, it's not something that is so far left out there. We do have a society, or we had a society at least, where traditionally a lot of people took out their frustrations on their children. Right? And so you would beat your children severely because you're upset and you're angry. And it may not be that you're angry with the child alone. It might be that you're angry with the entire situation. You're angry with life. You're angry with your partner. You're angry with whoever. But, the child is going to get cursed out. The child is going to get lashed or hit or beaten badly. You are then venting your frustrations out on the child. You're using your child as a tool to release your stress and frustration. Right, and that's, by the way, is almost core definition of abuse, right? And so that is something that we often have a lot of, or we had a lot of, In Trinidad, because it sounds familiar. I'm certain people listening can say, I experienced that, or I know somebody who went through that.
But this specific kind of action, and it's not even punishing, but you explain a little bit sometimes, so someone will take out their frustrations, wherever the frustration came from, on their children. But this particular kind of action, dropping the child on its head on 3 separate occasions, at least 3 occasions, which came to the attention of the court in this matter, that particular form of dealing with your frustration, what do you say about that?
All right. So that is a bit. That's an underestimation. It's not a bit. That's a lot more, a lot further out there than the average person who is taking out the frustration of the child through what we call licks or physically hitting the child. Now, when you get to the point of dropping the child on the head, that falls more within the realm of sadistic behavior. And sadistic behavior really speaks to people who experience a release, a joy, or a pleasure, whether it be just regular pleasure or even sexual pleasure or whatever, but pleasure from hurting others or seeing others hurt. And so this one steps a little bit away from just venting your frustration onto a child and actually using a child's pain for you to feel better, that ups the ante significantly from just regular abuse to something we call sadistic abuse. And so it makes me wonder what else was done to the child. It was the first time, it wasn't the second. It might suggest to me that that perhaps this father was utilizing this child's pain as a means or a mechanism for him to have a release and for him to feel better about himself. And that is a significant notch up above the abuse we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and you're doing that to get at the mother.
Yes. So well, I can't say that specifically was the cause, or to hurt the mom, or I don't know. I don't know what his motivations are or were. I didn't read that, and I haven't spoken to him. But that can be one of the significant motivators. It can be that he felt that that's the best way to hurt the mom, by hurting the child. But again, that is sadistic. So you're trying to hurt someone else by hurting someone who can't defend themselves. And so then you're talking, that's sadistic behavior. So you're getting pleasure, manipulating your spouse, right? Hurting them through hurting the children or hurting the child. And dropping a child on his head is one of, when you speak about abuse, I don't want to rank and rate abuse to feel as though they have one that's worse than the other and so on or whatever. But there's a high significant risk of internal trauma and damage, even death, when you're talking about dropping a baby on its head. That is significant. That is significant because it says to you there that this person has, maybe they have, but they've reduced the significance of the potential damage of death, the risk of that or whatever, versus how bothered the other party may be by the action, how upset that it gets, how much it's like saying, if for those persons familiar with Uno, this is your ultimate card, this is your draw 4. So your ultimate solution to addressing any issue, argument, thing that you can't treat with, is to significantly physically put your child in harm's way, and not just harm's way, but within the remit of death. And if you think about that, which rational, and I use the word normal here, normative functioning person, psychologically, would do that? Who would put their child, it's not somebody else's child, it's yours. Who would put their child's life at risk like that to just to punish the other person, the other parent, or to feel better about themselves.
Right. So,
That's very subnormal functioning.
And let's talk about the other person in this now, the other parent, the mother. She was, according to the reporting in the newspaper, she was prepared to go and say that the child fell off the bed because the child was on the bed with the two of them. And it is, well, let's deal with that first. I mean, what, something is amiss with her as well.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, because in my humble opinion, more than just the father, a lot of people should have been charged in that situation. Everybody who was aware that this child was being dropped on his head and made no report or did nothing to rectify that situation should have been charged. Because this was an easily avoidable situation. This is a situation where the system failed the child and system failed the parents as well. Because everybody should have reported that. That's the law. Once you are aware of a child being abused, it's a criminal offense not to report that information. So for everybody who was aware that the child was being dropped on the head, the family members, relatives, neighbors, and so on, should have been charged. If not fined, some people should have been facing jail time as well, perhaps even the mother. And to those persons who say that it may be wicked because the mom perhaps was going through her own abuse and so on, yes, most likely she was. It sounds like like it was an abusive functioning type relationship. Perhaps I'm assuming here, because there's not much evidence for me to say otherwise, but from general history of persons functioning within the same sphere, is perhaps what we may call a negative codependent relationship. Yeah, so that when one person is upset, the other person has to be upset too. So what you find generally in those types of negative codependent relationships is that one person tries to outdo the hurt of the other person. So if you have hurt me, then I am going to hurt you more because I am hurting because you are hurting, kind of, and it's back and forth kind of functioning. And there's no mature person to say, listen, I recognize that you are hurting and I'm going to step out, or perhaps let's address your hurt. No, both persons hurting and they keep hurting each other.
Yeah.
And there's an extreme case, seems to be an extreme case here, where perhaps the mom also was trapped in an this abusive arrangement and relationship, and it just continued.
Yeah, and it is relatives who had to go and tell the authorities that no, that is not what happened. The man did it, threw the child off the bed on the head, and he'd done it twice before, once at home and once in the bushes somewhere. You describe the mother's response and reaction to this as negative codependence. So, what is positive codependence?
Well,
if I may ask.
Codependence in itself was not to be a positive thing. When you're a child, there's some level of dependence, some level of even codependence. How your parents function and their moods and so on will impact you, of course. But as an adult, you don't really want to have codependent behaviors. You don't want to only feel happy when somebody feels happy, right? You don't only want to feel sad every time that your partner feels sad. That's not necessarily healthy functioning. But then you see it can get very dark. It can get dark so even if we're talking about hypothetically positive codependence, the idea of codependence in itself is still not a positive thing. So even if you have somebody who's, yes, they're always happy because this person that they're with is always happy, while that may sound positive, the idea of only being happy when somebody else makes you happy or somebody else is happy is still not a good thing. So codependence itself is not the most healthy way of functioning in a relationship. But it can get very toxic. It can get, especially in abusive or narcissistic type relationships and so on, it can get very toxic. So if this person is unwell or unhappy, they're arguing and you're quarreling and so on, you are not happy. And then you have to take it to the extreme. So it may very well be, as it sounds like to me, a relationship that was an abusive one, where the man felt sometimes he had to take it up a notch. Now, I didn't read or see or hear anything about him physically hitting her. So I don't know if instead of hitting her, what he did was take the frustration out on the child. I really don't know. And so that's what I'm saying. Based on the limited amount of information, we can't diagnose per se, but we can explore and look into some of the behaviors or some of the pathologies that might account for this type of behavior.
Yeah, on the face of it, people looking at it, reading the story and so on would suggest, I mean, immediately that, well, this lady also needs to have her head examined, as people say in public, in normal parlance.
Yeah, well, yes. You stayed into a relationship that clearly was not a healthy one. You were aware that he was abusing the child. You did nothing really, at least publicly, about it. You didn't take the child out of the situation. And while some persons may be quick to say here that the woman is the victim and we are victim blaming, it's not that. The woman is not the victim here. The child is the victim. And the fact that she had allowed the child to be utilized as a pawn to hurt her by having childhood, and not have had that addressed, I feel as though she needs to bear some significant responsibility in that. Yeah, and even for someone who may not have their own issues going on, existing in a relationship that is so heavily negatively codependent, one suggests that there are some issues that you need to have addressed, and then two, if you're existing in an abusive relationship for an extended period, that too raises significant alarms. That too can affect your psyche and your functioning. You would still be somebody who needs significant help. And so in this situation, not just the husband, I would recommend needing significant intervention, but the mother as well. The mother lost a child. The mother clearly was part of this codependent, abusive, functioning relationship. So she too needs help. Yeah. She too needs help. They clearly all functioning within this kind of trauma space. And so left to me, I would recommend definitely he needs intervention, not just jail time, but psychological intervention. And so too does the mother, also needs psychological intervention.
Yeah, and bearing in mind what you say, the possibility of well, in your case and in my, yourself and myself now examining it and suggesting that the mother needs to have attention. There are those people who would probably take a dim view of that and be negative about us trying to put too much blame on the mother here, because she's also a victim, it appears, and we get accused of victim shaming or victim blaming, whatever
victim blaming, yes.
So we have to be, but these are things that will come to the ordinary mind. That so I'm wondering to what extent somebody like yourself, who may have seen this in the paper, somebody in your line of work, in your profession, and take it upon themselves to try and reach either the both of these parents or the mother in particular, and say, well, look, you need some help here, and volunteer to do some work with her or with them, to prevent probably this thing getting out of hand. Because if this is not dealt with and treated with, we don't know what way it might lead in times to come.
Well, very true. Very, very true. I agree with that. I do a lot of volunteer work when I can, based on my schedule, but there are resources that are also available, right? Government resources, by the way, free to the public that might also be available. So, they would have, a crime would have been committed. And so based on that crime, there's the victim support unit through TTPS, who would come on site and can provide some level of intervention and counseling and so on to the parents. That initial assessment may allow them to recognize that she too has a lot going on and carrying a lot, and that she may need further intervention so they can carry it further up the chain, right? There's also National Family Services, NFS, through social development, that counseling there is free as well. So there are resources that can be accessed. Yeah, Families in Action. I won't recommend real prices in this one, but there are some resources, government resources, that are available to families, right, who are in need. Um, but you also have organizations, persons like myself who are always volunteering, NGOs who are out there who are hiring persons like myself to go out and do work in the communities or work with families like that. So yeah, there are resources. There are resources. What I would say to anybody like that who was interested or wants to reach out or even seek advice as to what's the next best step or what to do, um, they can probably look out and try to reach me on social media, Facebook or Instagram. That's Sule Joseph and Associates on Instagram or Facebook. They can feel free to do that, and I can try to direct them as best as possible. There's also, of course, Children's Authority. If you feel a child is being abused, several hotlines. You can reach out to them on social media as well, or call one of their hotlines. Right? There is support that is available. Right? And there's a lot. So for persons to say that they don't have any at all, and they didn't know what to do, I think we kind of passed that stage. We passed the stage of sitting on your hands and doing nothing and saying that you didn't know what to do.
So let's say somebody from the Children's Authority or somebody outside would have seen this and tried to bring it to the attention of the Children's Authority. They have a duty, a responsibility, or anything like that to act. How do they get involved?
Yes, yes, of course. Now, Children's Authority primary goal and function is to protect the children of Trinidad and Tobago. Primary goal and function. Punto final, protect all children. So if there's a child who's believed to be abused, it doesn't matter if you know exactly for sure that they're being abused or you think they're being abused. Once you think that the child is being abused, then it can be reported to Children's Authority with enough information for them to investigate. Right? And they will work along, Children's Authority will work along with the Child Protection Unit out of the TTPS. Right? They will work along with that, with the TTPS, and investigate to ensure the report was not a fraudulent one or what is going on. Right? It is better to make the report and have it investigated than not to make the report and then some months later to hear that a child has passed. That is a travesty, untellable, or a travesty beyond that we can imagine, to have a baby die from an abusive situation. Yeah. Especially when chances are the people clearly are mentally unhealthy who are treating with the child.
Yeah, I want to come back to
that. It should have stepped in and probably had the child removed.
Yeah, I want to come back to the probable role and function of the Children's Authority in this a little bit, but I wanted to go back to the mother who, the story said that she did go to the police in Capdeville and reported the matter, and they told her to go to the police station in Point Fortin proper, but she never did.
Well, that was ridiculous, to be honest. I'll deal with the part with mommy after, but I'll deal with the police first.
Yeah.
As far as I am aware, I've done work with police countless times. I've even worked as a therapist with the TTPS, right? As long as you make a report to a police station and one is so potentially significant, they have a duty to follow up on that. They should be the ones calling forward to whichever station. They should be the ones then calling to Children's Authority and so on, because the parent came and made a report. And if that is the case, so I was saying that I was unaware of the mom making a report. So if she did, my apologies in that regard. But if the mom made a report, then regardless to whichever station, they have a core duty to follow up on that. They can't wait for the mother to go to another station to make a report before they follow up. So again, the system dropped the ball. Somebody in that station needs to be held accountable and responsible for the end result of this child passing, because that's unacceptable. They needed to forward that to Children's Authority. They needed investigations to start taking place. And most times when these things happen to me, I stand to be corrected. The issue more so is just paperwork because it is out of district, right? And if you're out of district by 2 streets and whatever, I suppose the officer taking the information from you may not want to do the extra paperwork of writing it up to have to pass it on to somebody else and maybe follow up on that information and all of that nonsense.
Yeah, because
I think system-wise, there was a failure there to the child and a failure to the parents.
there's lots more we could get into. There's the whole thing about the man getting some time off. He'd done 10 years plus, 10 years and 7 months in pre-trial publicity, and I think the people at the Legal Aid and Advisory Authority who represented him asked for some consideration, and so therefore he will have time taken off because of what they call his remorseful behavior. But we have to leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much, Sule Joseph, counseling psychologist, on this matter.
Thanks for having me, Andy. I just want to reiterate again, a lot of what we discussed today was supposition. A lot of it was based on the limited info that we have and not on all of the facts. So it's not a diagnosis of anybody who we've discussed today.
You're a true professional, my friend. Good. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks for having me. Have a blessed one.
You too.
Take care, Trinidad and Tobago.
This has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.